Hi, I'm Melissa. I'm an intuitive coach and mentor,
And I'm Luisa. I'm an awakening coach and energy healer.
and we're your spiritual besties.
We're just everyday women having an extraordinary human experience.
We've both been led down the path of amazing discoveries through the power of spirituality.
So, we're here to share our experiences as we dive deep into all things sacred.
Our hope is that we can contribute to the collective conversation to help you feel less alone and more confident as you walk the path to becoming more connected with the universe.
We'd love for you to join us each week as we share our discoveries and navigate this journey together.
Yeah. I think that's part of the control, right? The way that I see it is we are conditioned to, we're supposed to control everything. We're supposed to have a grasp on ourselves. We're not supposed to show emotion in our 9 to 5s. We're not supposed to show emotion because it comes through as weak in some relationships. For those people who are parents, I know that in my own upbringing, it was like, I don't know that I knew that people had emotions. It was something that I was never shown. Retrospectively, do I know it? Did I feel emotion? Yes. But it was, especially being raised by a male figure, by my father, who was very not emotional because that's the way that he grew up. It was like, no, you're supposed to control yourself. You're not supposed to have emotional outbursts. Your emotions are not supposed to overarch anything that you feel or anything. You don't live your life based on emotion. But it's if we don't deal with and or even are able to acknowledge or understand, right? Because I think understanding our emotions for a lot of us is the first step. Understanding why we feel that. So energetically, it's there and it's attracting like vibrations, but we don't even understand the emotions to even understand why it's attracting, why it's attracting. And I think for a lot of us, we can get lost right in that space because then with every emotion or every outburst or every showing of emotion, there is some societal idea attached to it. Like, no, love is an emotion that you show in these situations. Pain is something that you express only in these situations. And I know that this isn't true for everyone, but I think as women, we're so shamed in being emotional. Like, you're overly emotional. You can't be this emotional. But it's if we don't process that through everything else, if we don't let it flow, and when we are able to let it come to our awareness, then we just judge it.
Hey there. What if I told you that I have the exact roadmap that will take you from feeling unfulfilled, stuck, and overwhelmed to living a life that is truly meaningful and filled with purpose? Well, I'm super excited to announce the release of my brand new masterclass called The Clarity Code: 3 Steps to Discover Your Passion and Unlock More Meaning in Your Life. So, if you're ready to finally figure out what you're meant to do in this life and how you can feel incredibly fulfilled in your day to day life, you can go ahead and click the link in the show notes below. Access this brand new masterclass right now.
That's what a lot of us do is, oh, I'm going to just judge it. Most of it is conditioning. But I feel letting it get to the point where it shows up as a disease is when we finally pay attention. But I think that's where we're at the turning point, at least I hope collectively. I think that we're at a point collectively where we're starting to recognize that we don't need it to get to that place, that there are ways for us to be aware of what's happening. And I think that's a lot of the work that you and I are here trying to do is just let people know that there are ways to deal and manage those things without it getting to a point that's going to impact our quality of life significantly now for the rest of it. Do you have a different perspective on that?
I completely agree. Yeah. While you're saying all that, my mind also just goes to where it all starts, or where what throughout history has perpetuated this, and especially with the you mentioned that as women and even men, certain emotions are just not okay to. It has have not historically been okay to show, like sadness, even anger, some of these things, even fear, right? Like not wanting to show fear. But when you think about it, from my perspective, as I'm thinking this through, it almost seems like anger, sadness, and fear are the big three of these themes that have come up, which would be suppressed, which is why we're not in a healthy place collectively of how we're expressing these things. Because when you think about it, only recently are we in a time where even we could say we're remotely in some sort of world in which it could be peaceful. But you still see things in the Middle East, right? You still see wars and all this still going on. It's like in some areas of the world, they're more advanced. Some areas are literally just still living in the past. When you think about the past, right? What was it? It was war. What war? That's tied to anger. There was death tied to grief and sadness. And there's these themes of control and power over fear of being, and what's fear? A lot of times coming from powerlessness, feeling like I have no power, I have no control. And then you have on the flip side people that are in positions of power and are in positions of control. And what is that medium of control these days? Is it's money, right? It's value. And that ties to what you're saying about this whole 9 to 5, because when you think about it, and I think this is really interesting too, is when you think about how America in certain ways has always been the country that's been leading the charge when it comes to freedom. Thinking of initially it was like the church and the state, right? And then it was like that being separated from, because before it was like the church and the state was one thing, and that's how they would control people, right? There was no sort of governments, that was just the church, and they would control people based on their beliefs, right? It's like, oh, when Jesus's time, right after Jesus passed away, it was like they were all rushing to be like, oh, he said this, and this, our idea is right versus yours.
Yeah.
And so the church was how they control people. And then you had governments, and the governments are these sort of mediums of being able to control. But then you've always had these sort of revolts, or these sort of like themes of freedom, right? When you think about it, like modern day slavery is like the whole 9 to 5 scenario, right? Is, oh, you have to be working for money because without money you couldn't survive. But that's all the illusion. So it's very interesting that where we're at now is we're totally in this new awakening phase where we're like, all of these systems haven't really been working, and we're wanting to not only create more freedom but also free ourselves from these limiting belief systems and these emotions that have held us back for so long. So then you got people like us that are in the holistic field that are really leading the charge and on the cutting edge of essentially helping people with that freedom, and realizing that all comes from within. It's all an illusion out there. If we're able to free ourselves from our own limiting thoughts and emotions, then we don't even have to be held back because we're holding ourselves back.
Yeah. I think that is the powerful thing. And I think that is the message that is the most important, is for us to realize that it is within us. I like to say I have a whole universe inside of me, because that's literally how I feel. My limitation is myself. I am my only limitation. And I can see how it can be scary, I think, for all of those organizations that are trying to control us. I always think of the field of marketing, which, as much as we both have to use it in our own businesses, is like what we're using it for is completely different. Because I feel like even in the field of marketing is like they're using our psychology against us essentially. And it's us being able to wake up and see that. So before, when I saw an ad and there was this beautiful, I don't know, 5'9" blonde, skinny woman, the idea would be like, I'm supposed to look like that. Where now it is to their benefit that I think that I'm supposed to look like that, because that's how they sell products. But if we can't even wake up to that fact, which I think, as simple as that is, I think we're literally in the awakening era of that. We're just starting to realize, hey, these organizations that we gave all this power to have all this control, are using that to be able to control us, to keep us small, because it's not to their benefit to have people like us who make and help people understand that you have the power to control your narrative. It is, we're co-creators of our existence, of course, there is something greater than us. But in terms of right here in the 3D, the choices that we make, we each individually have the power to say, that's not something that I want to see. That's not an ad that I'm interested in, or I'm not going to spend that much time on my phone. But I think it's the beginning of us even awakening to the fact that I have that power. And I think that powerlessness has been instilled in us for so many years. I think this is the first time in history that we have the power to co-create the lives that we want. but we have to see through the illusion, which I think is a lot of work and really hard to break out of. But I think we're doing our part.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time to be alive, honestly, and at the cutting edge of starting to realize what the root of all this is and how to actually take your power back.
Yeah.
And it's not anyone out there that has the power necessarily. It's that we believed that it was something outside of us.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting now to actually see what the real work is of taking our power back, and how it just really has to do with a lot of just acceptance, and also just understanding and thinking about what's the root of what a lot of the decisions that we make, right? Are a lot of these decisions and a lot of the root of the thoughts that we have, are those rooted in shame? Are those rooted in guilt? Are those rooted in fear? Are those rooted in grief? Are those rooted in those lower energy fields that keep us powerless? Versus, are they rooted in something like love? Are they rooted in joy? Are they rooted in peace? And then you start to realize, if you're anything like me over the course of time, that a lot of these thoughts that we've had are actually rooted in what we believe other people would perceive of us, or what other people would think if we did this, or what if this. And it's not even about us. It's not even about what our truth and what our actual values are. And then you start to realize, wow, if I actually just stepped into my truth and my own values, my life might look very different than what it is now. And then you start to realize, like, how much of my life have I actually been living for others? My decisions and my thoughts have I actually just been making, not even out of me, but out of fear of what other people would think. And when you think about it too, there's a book that was written by a woman, Ronnie Ware. I'm not sure if she's still alive. She might be. Hopefully she is. But I was thinking, she was a hospice nurse, or she is. But anyway, I'm going to say was / is a hospice nurse that wrote a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And she interviewed or spoke to thousands and thousands of people that were on their deathbed. And she would always ask them the same question. What are your top 5 regrets? And the number one regret that she got across the board from thousands of people was, I wish that I lived a life that was true to myself and not the life that other people expected of me or wanted of me. And again, if you actually think about it, this is the number one regret. This is the thing that at the end of our lives, if statistics continue to prove true, that the majority of us are going to be asking ourselves there. So instead of just waiting to that point, why don't we think of that now and be like, are we living the life? Are we having the thoughts? Are we making the decisions? Are we feeling the ways that are truly in alignment with ourselves? Or is that something outside of us? And again, it just all plays into this idea of taking our power back and making those decisions for ourselves.
I love that. I love that you said asking ourselves, because I think that's important. Asking ourselves where these decisions that we're making are rooted in. What are they rooted in? Because I think that question could probably change so many people's lives. I know for myself, if I had stopped for 1 second and asked myself, what is this decision rooted in? I would have realized much sooner that most of it was not rooted in anything that I wanted. And another thought I had while you were saying that was that I didn't even know what I wanted, because I had no idea who I was. I was full of living a life of expectations for the external, whoever I thought that was, when in reality, the only thing that mattered was how I felt at the end of the night. That's one of the things that I always measured by, was when I lay my head down, how do I feel? And when it's time to get up in the morning, how do I feel? And I think that asking ourselves that question of what are these decisions rooted in that we're making is the equivalent of that. How am I going to feel? How do I feel? Is this what I want? Whatever I want. But I think it does take a lot for us to be able to get to that point. But I love, because I hope that everyone listening literally just stops for a second and asks themselves, what is that rooted in? What are those decisions rooted in?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting too, just to think about, because the lens that I'm looking at the world now too is what do the majority of people struggle with? You got 40 million people in the world. This might be the US actually, that struggle with anxiety, right? Depression. Anxiety and depression are the biggest things that people are struggling with right now. You could just blanket and just say, like, we all struggle with some of these things, right? And when you think about it, I have an interesting lens into what the root of some of these are. And my lens of it is that both anxiety and depression are symptoms of being disconnected from that part of yourself. Because they say that all anxiety is separation anxiety. And so feeling separate from your true self. And depression is pretty much the same thing. The way that I see it is just almost a disconnection from your true self. And there may be all these sorts of reasons as to why or how it got to that place. But in a sense, then at least we know the solution would be connecting with your true self, getting connected to that part of you and just feeling 100% in alignment with your true values, with your true self. And if you weren't in a constant state of stress or a constant state of sadness, who could you be? Who would we be when we're in? And I mean, at least it's great to know that we're in a time when we're coming out of a very dark period and we're moving into more of that sense of connection. So as we continue to step into who we are, our lives are going to get a lot better. We're going to be able to make the world a better place by changing ourselves and making ourselves better. So it is really amazing to see how you've been doing that in your own life as well, because again, as you're doing that, you're also becoming an example for others.
Yeah. And I think of it too as that being an important piece for me of my own soul's purpose in this lifetime. It's being that example because I was exactly the people that we are talking about, the 40 million people. I was very depressed. I couldn't identify it. I didn't have a word for it, but I would probably call it anxiety more towards the last years before my awakening. But depression was very prominent in my life for most of it. And I think rooted in different things, but the main thing was fear. And recently, I have completely let go. I literally live in a flow state for the most part, outside of the few responsibilities that I now allow myself to have in my life. And it's really transformational to be able to get to this side. But I do feel that it is a part of my journey to hopefully allow people to understand that it is possible. I love the idea of other people knowing that, hey, this is possible. This is not impossible. I am just like the rest of us, very average American. Freedom to me has totally transformed me. I shared in one of our recent episodes that I actually feel like I'm going through like a whole other transformation, and I don't even recognize the person that I used, to be honest, because I only operate out of, I have the word authenticity in front of me. And if it's not authentic to me, I just have no interest in participating in it. And unlike when I first started to experience this, I used to feel the guilt and shame and all the things that come along with making choices that felt like being selfish, because that's what it felt like at first. But it's not being selfish, because I actually know now that I'm doing a disservice, not just to myself, to my children, and to all of the generations that are coming after me. And it seems so small, right? Like, how could the choice to, for example, not have my kids in 100 activities, how could that choice be so impactful 3 generations from now? But it is, because it's me deciding to take time to take care of myself, to nurture my mind, my body, my soul, make sure that I'm leaving the space open to be able to listen to myself, to be able to know who I am, what I want, how everything that I do makes me feel, which filling up my schedule the way that it used to be did not allow for me to be able to do that. And I think that it's those tiny little things that we do in our day to day that are going to allow us to continue to break the mold, to continue to awaken, to continue to come into ourselves, because that's what needs to happen. There's nothing outside of ourselves that's going to give us the answer that we're looking for. The answer is, it's right here. It's maybe painful, but we don't have to suffer through it. That's a choice that we make. And you made that point earlier about pain and suffering. And I think I might have heard it from you actually the first time, was the pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional.
That's a wrap for this episode.
We hope you found some inspiration, a helpful tip, or maybe just a good laugh.
Remember, amazing human, you are not alone on this path to connect with your inner wisdom and the universe.
To stay connected and keep the conversation going, subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast so you never miss an episode.
And if this episode resonated with you, share it with your friends, family, or anyone who might find value in it. Until next time.